All right. We are live currently for the LCCC match, Joe Curley versus Kurt Spice. I'm here future with Rudrose. Sorry for the late start. I had some technical difficulties, but we're here now. Rudrose, awesome to be here with you.
Likewise, Rip. Thank you for having me. Hey, man, it wouldn't be an LCC broadcast without tech issues, right? Those things are just impossible to avoid. So we're gonna have fun with Speci versus Kurt here.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this match. It's actually going to be Emerald Steel versus Amethyst Steel. And even though Emerald Steel does have that Ursula to discard action cards from Speci, it still has to be something to answer with that Diablo.
Absolutely. So we'll go ahead and ink a Smee to start off with Speci. He's going to put out our Chernabog followers. Also could have put out the Diablo, so we had a couple choices, although turn one, you know there's nothing your opponent's going to do to be able to threaten this Chernabog, so you can guarantee get the card draw off.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a good start for Speci. He does have that turn one Chernabog. And we see here Kurt with his hand having that Diablo opening. I mean, it's just what the deck needs to do to open up with. Because if you do miss that Diablo early on, it is kind of hard for the Emerald Steel deck to kind of like combat whatever opposing decks that they do have. That's why me personally, when I play the deck myself, I find it really hard to pilot if I don't open up that Diablo shift line.
Absolutely. He calls the deck the Baltimore Ravens after the football team, I would imagine, in America. And it's not only is it looking good right now, he has two Diablo shift lines he can go in on, plus something like that Amethyst Chromacon in Speci's hand is going to just absolutely feed this Diablo. Although Speci does at least have the Fire the Cannons to counter, which he's going to use right now.
Yeah, that fire in the cannons is really clutch just to shut down that shift line because if you look at Kurt's hand right now, he does have a second Diablo that he can play out, but that's just pretty much going to slow him down for the early start, and that's going to be the
Mhm.
advantage that Speci needs.
Yeah, and this is one of the things I kind of like about Speci's build is he's so low to the ground with these one drops. I believe he has a grand total of 16 one cost characters plus the fire the cannons, but it allows in an early turn like this where you can use the cannons to threaten early removal and still put out another character as well.
Yeah, and what I do like about Speci's list in particular is compared to other Amethyst Steel builds, you do see them a little bit more focused on the four drop line with Zeus's, but Speci here is just always known to go for that early aggro approach, and I think that's going to favor him here just because Emerald Steel doesn't really have good characters to challenge back. They do have a lot of removal, but as far as challenging the board, he doesn't really have that much wide of an option.
Correct. Yeah, this normally would be a great opening for Speci, and it still is, but Kurt is just flying with the birds right now as he has three birds in hand and he can just reload, go for another Diablo, say, okay, what are the odds that you've got a second fire the cannons to bring this bird down?
Yeah, and that's the thing with a deck that Speci is using that's a more aggro approach is if it does get destroyed by actions early on, it's going to be pretty much hard to come back as well. But he does have the Amethyst Chromacon that will allow him to draw a card every turn, which is going to be the gas that he needs to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. A little dangerous because it feeds into the Diablo, but you're just hoping that, hey, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many cards you have. You can only play so much ink a turn, and I'm going to just get ahead of you lore wise.
Yeah, I agree there. And the good thing about Kurt, what he does have in his hand with the two Diablos is also those two Let the Storm the Rage ons. And right now, Speci, now he does again have that Chromacon to keep drawing, and that P is going to be clutch. But I'm hoping he would draw a second one because that's what's really going to be useful to stop your characters from getting destroyed.
Do you like going in on the Chromacon this turn, or would you rather see the Pete? Like, we know that Kurt has the Storm Rage on in hand, so the Pete could really stop that. Obviously, Speci doesn't know that. So would you rather see him going on the Pete, or do you maybe like doing the Chromacon plus the Diablo, start getting card draw before your opponent's Diablo can take advantage of it?
That's a good question. Well, when Kurt draws, he's going to have five cards in hand. And if he is going to shift in the Diablo, I mean, he could also pay three ink for it. That's going to be two cards in his hand. So I'm assuming here if Speci values more the lore and then going for the
Mhm.
P or just setting up maybe the Diablo and the Chromacon. He's gonna draw first, which is always the correct move to go here. I personally would probably just already set up the Chromacon and hold on to that P.
Yeah. Just I kind of like that too. Again, you're basically going to have to outrace this person.
Hmm.
If this match goes on too long, you would assume that green steel is eventually going to catch up. So Speci says he agrees. He says, "Yeah, let's just put the gas on now and get there as quickly as we can."
Yeah, and the thing with this, with the deck that Speci is using with the new cards that they got for 7, like that Cobra that we see there in the hand. What I do like
Hmm.
about this deck is you kind of play it at a lore threshold at 12 lore, because once this deck gets to 12 lore, like all of a sudden in one turn, it can get an insane amount of burst lore. And now with cards like the Cobra, you can close out the game pretty quick.
Absolutely. And we are going to ink that Cobra. It's a little vulnerable to some of the steel songs, but right now Speci just valuing getting out this Diablo. I really like the Diablo here over the Chernobog's followers. If your opponent were to sing on it, it's going to guarantee get you a card draw, whereas of course the Chernobog has to quest. And unless Kurt gets an action off the top here, which he does not, he is going to have to sacrifice one of these Storm Rage Ons in order to shift the Diablo this turn.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's what he has to do there. Now, he is going to be able to draw a card and replace the Letter Storm the Rageon when he does decide to sing it. And the
Hmm.
other Diablo could swing into the Maleficent and stop the bleeding a little bit there.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, he's pretty much in a good spot, I would say, but it's still pretty early to tell on. But right now, I wouldn't be too worried with the 4 lore deficit if I was
Yeah.
Kurt.
So we're going to ink the Ursula. We might even just raw play the other Diablo out. Looks like, and we didn't. We decided not to sing with the Diablo. Interestingly enough, we actually just challenged the Maleficent. Do you like that play, or do you think he should have just gone in on the Storm?
I mean, it does make sense because if he does go wide himself to contest the board, or as well gain some lore early on, just so he can close out the game and not have to prolong it. I mean, it makes sense. I'm not sure if um if it was a 100% correct move, but I mean, I'm pretty sure with the second Diablo out, it makes a little bit more sense because when that Chromacon does exert, he's gonna start drawing more cards and potentially draw more removal to answer Speci.
Yeah. Speci did have that minor delay with the fire of the cannons, but kind of looking back on it now already, I'm wondering if maybe he should have just let the Diablo shift and then use the cannons to take out the big one. Easy to say in hindsight, of course, but
Yeah, I mean, we can see the cards, and but even then, with the amount of cards that Speci does have, I think Kurt's just thinking if I can just get enough bodies on board, I won't have to worry about it later rather than now. And he's keeping
yeah.
that one Let the Storm the Range on just for maybe something that a two quester, which is going to be probably the best hit to use with that card. And then he also has a Pete to shut down those action cards that gain lore that Speci does have.
Yeah, speaking of Pete's, we see a little proxy Pete there over on Kurt's side. That's, I think, the only new card in his deck, which is a new Duel Link color, which is a steel and emerald Pete. It's a 5/5, plus I believe when it's exerted, your pirate characters take or get resist 1, I think is the text on it.
Yes, that card is pretty spicy. I am seeing a lot of more Emerald Steel players use it in their deck just because right now we are in a heavy steel meta and resist is just really strong.
Hmm. So I'm guessing we're going to go in on the Pete on Speci's side as well. Put out the Chernobog, which does protect this Chernobog. Says, hey, you can't sing any of your songs to take it out. And while we are giving Kurt plenty of cards in hand with the Chromacon, we're also just saying your deck. One thing about Green Emerald is it's never been very fast at getting a lot of lore. So if we can keep drawing these lore burn cards like the Goat, like Knowledge and Wisdom, we can still just race ahead of our opponent, even if they're answering everything we put out.
Yeah, and what the P also does, it guarantees 2 lore. Now, that might not seem a lot, but the lore in this matchup is very, very, very important, especially for the late game. And the P being able to solidify at least 2 lore and an extra draw is pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the one thing that a goat doesn't do us any good if it's in the discard. So if we start singing these discard spells, which actually we inked it, so never mind that, but we'll just have our own Pete come down, setting up a shift line and preventing our opponent from playing any actions of their own.
Yes, and it looks like Kurt here is just going to go ahead and get some lore in. And then the good thing about the Diablos, like I mentioned earlier, now when Chromacon is used, he's going to be able to draw an additional 2 cards.
Hmm. Not to mention the card for turn. Yeah, Kurt will not be lacking for card draw this game. Fessy draws into a snake off the top. Kurt will say, hey, you drew as well. I'll go ahead and draw 2, and we get a third Diablo out there. Oh man. So the only spot removal Speci has in his deck is those two copies of Fire the Cannons. We've already seen one burned. So if he wants to get rid of anything else in this deck, it's going to have to be through challenging because his deck is very, very low on the spot removal effects.
Yeah, and the most important card in this matchup is going to be that Pete. So I'd be happy if I was especially just seeing one so far. And what I also like about is if you notice a lot of Ruby Amethyst decks in this meta have dropped a lot of the bounce packages, but here
Mhm.
in Amethyst Steel, it's still very strong. And in this matchup, being able to repeat, as they say it, is probably going to be the best defense that Speci has for all these removal tools that Kurt has.
Yeah, that single Chromicon just drew Kurt three cards, one for the Chromicon itself, and then two off of both Diablo triggers. Holy moly, he's going to be able to do whatever he wants card value wise. And Speci has these benches, but I don't think Kurt is running any items. So unless Speci just wants two lore, unfortunately, this Benja just isn't going to do much.
Yeah, the bench is not very strong in this matchup in particular. Very good against Ruby Sapphire and a lot of Sapphire Steel decks, but right now that bench is not doing anything. What I would be aiming for is getting potentially a goat on the board to start getting at least guaranteeing two lore potentially every turn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we do
We're
see that
actually
repeat.
Yeah, well, you mentioned he's really valuing that Pete saying, okay, how do I, I'm going to lose through all the action spot removals. I need to, as you said, repeat, make sure I'm shutting off these actions turn by turn to kind of put me on even ground with my opponent, right? Hey, if I have to only do battle through challenges, I need to make sure that's the only way you can interact with me as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to be a key thing because as you can see there, the Chernobog, that's going to be another guaranteed lore that the Pete gets to protect. And again, every lore matters in this matchup. He's not really caring that Kurt is drawing all those cards just because, again, if he can just keep repeating, that's going to be his best chance.
Yeah. We see the quest with the Chernobog. Surely he's going to banish for the card draw since the opposing one drop Diablo could take care of it. We have two goats in hand with a knowledge and wisdom, so that alone represents what, six lore? That's pretty good.
Yeah, Knowledge and Wisdom is such an annoying card because it's just a card that basically says, here, I end the game. But Kurt does have a lot of cards in his hand. Wow, it looks like he's playing Sapphire and Steel over here.
I know, right? And thank goodness that Pete prevented all these actions because otherwise Kurt could absolutely just wipe this board with the excess of Storm Rage on, Strength of a Raging Fire. He just drew into a Bruno. We shift our third Diablo. Oh man, Kurt is not going to be lacking for card draw here. You don't even need a card like the Muses. Your opponent's not going to have enough things to bounce.
Yeah, exactly. Because the issue here was that Speci early on in the game didn't get too much of a lore advantage early on, which is kind
Mm-hmm.
of okay when he do set up the Diablos that Kurt has because I mean at that point it's what you have to do just get amount of insane amount of lore early on. And then right here, Kurt just play that Ursula just to get some knowledge on what Speci has and what his game plan is. And those goats and that knowledge of Wyndham is going to be part of it because that's already right there with those three cards, six lore that he can gain.
Yeah. I think Kurt just goes wide here, right? You know, a deck like this, it doesn't have any way to deal with a big wide board. So the more characters you can jam out, as we see here, I believe we're inking the muses. Yeah, so we inked the muses. We're playing the Pete and telling our opponent, well, just in case you wanted to use that knowledge wisdom next turn, I'm not going to let you. And I don't know if Speci has a way. I'm going to check his list really quick to check if he has a way to answer evasives. I don't think he does. Yeah, it doesn't look like it. So these Diablos essentially are just going to sit on the board the entire game.
Yeah, even then, if you could answer them, I mean, this is the type of deck where you don't really spend time answering the board back and go more, full aggro.
Speci uses the Chromicon. Tell me, Rip, would you play a card, a two-cost item that says you draw one card and your opponent draws four?
That is a very strong card. Man, and
Oh
he
my
just has almost
goodness.
half his deck out.
I know he might mill out at this rate. Maybe that's what Speci's going for. Just say, all right, I need to run you out of cards. Like, good gravy.
Yeah, and then that repeat, I mean, it did gain him that two lore, but right now, with the amount of board presence that Kurt has, it's going to be like a 2 or 3 turn clock, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Do you see a way for Speci to get out of this? Do you just like hit the next Chromicon and just try to get as much instant lore as you can? Those goats are going to be kind of expensive, but
Yeah, I mean, you just have to put an insane amount of lore as fast as you can before things get crazy. I mean, they're already getting crazy. The good thing about the goats is they're guaranteed to lore. So even if they do
yeah.
get removed, you do at least get that extra lore on them. But just right now, with the low lore amount that Speci is at, if we just had a little bit more extra, I feel like things would look a little bit brighter. But right now, he's again on a two or three turn clock.
Kurt opting to only draw 2 cards there as his hand is already filled with what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. He has 16 cards in hand. Oh my goodness.
That is a lot of options that he could use on as far as removal goes against Speci. And again, I think right now his best option that he has is just again trying to go for as much lore as he possibly can.
Yeah. He's going to put the goat out. That'll put him up to 8. I don't think there's much benefit in challenging this opposing Pete. I think you just quest because you have to know your board is getting wiped next turn with all the cards Kurt has in hand.
Yeah, it's again, it's not as bad as it seems, but I mean, it is pretty bad as it seems. But again, with a deck like Speci, you kind of could just get a good amount of lore randomly. But here we do see that Kurt has 4, 5 removal tools that he could use to just destroy Speci's board.
Yeah. Yeah, he has absolutely enough with all the strengths and the storms to take out everything if he wants. And then if I'm Kurt, I'm just going wide. He could opt to try to hit his hand with the discard, but 10 lore is still a lot to gain. Yes, cards like Knowledge and Wisdom Goat are worth 2, but a Goat is 4 ink. That's most of your ink pool every turn. So I think Kurt can absolutely just race ahead of him here.
Yeah, and if we do look at Speci's hand, he does have the goat and the honey card. Can't remember quite the name, but that's
Honey Marin, yeah.
Honey Marin. Honey Marin plays like a go and does get a lore on play if there is something exerted. So he does have 2 cards in his hand that do gain 2 lore instantly, plus the 1 off of go when it gets destroyed. So that's 3 lore in his hand. Still not sure if it's enough.
So Pete's gonna sing "Strength of a Raging Fire," and that goat is going to go to the discard pile, and we will gain 1 lore for our troubles at least. And I have a feeling that is not the only song rip that we are about to see these birds and Pete sing here.
Yeah, he has too many options in his hand as far as removal tools, and he can also put more pressure, lower pressure on the board with more characters. We do see that resist card you were talking about earlier come down.
Some insane Pete on Pete action as Pete will shift in. He will challenge the Pete. During the challenge, the big 6-cost Pete does become exerted, so its resist effect does kick in, so it only takes 2 back from that one. And we'll sing another Strength of a Raging Fire to take out the snake as well. And now we're just going to free quest with the Ursulas and the Diablos, putting ourselves to 9 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on board. So Speci essentially has 2 turns to try to steal this game. I think he needs a lot of knowledge and wisdoms and honey mirrors. He needs as much like cheap lore gain as he can get here.
It's not over till it's over. And I do like the fact that with those Chromicons, I mean, you kind of just say you're going to draw either way, right? So let me try to draw as much cards that you can in this scenario as defense. I think Pete here would be very strong just to try to guarantee some more lore on the board. And that would be a card that would be beneficial just to draw a card. And it doesn't matter at this point if Kurt does draw more cards because he already has such a large amount.
Yeah, Kurt is not going to be going below 15 cards in hand, I don't think, this game.
Oh,
we did get the Pete.
He did get the Pete.
Like, I like the protection effect, but man, it's kind of slow. Yeah, Kurt checking his cards, just making sure he doesn't deck out, which of course he's not at any real risk of. All of these card draw effects are optional, so he's not forced into taking all of them. As we get another Strength of a Raging Fire, as well as a Hidden Cove, as well as a Bruno, as well as a Smee. My goodness.
Yeah, because since you know that Speci can't deck him out, I mean, there's just no reason not to draw all these cards and just to make sure you have the answers that you need for whatever
Exactly.
threats or scenarios that you can put in whatever Speci has. Because what makes a good player, what I do like about these players is even if it looks like you're so ahead, you still leave no room for error.
Hmm. Rip, have you ever seen one of these matches where someone had 2 rows of cards down in their open hand pool?
I have not seen this maybe since set one, Ruby Amethyst versus Ruby Amethyst mirror match action going on. But yeah, this is crazy. It looks like he's playing Oswald over here.
Right, yeah, exactly. Oswald for hand draw. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So if I counted correctly, I think Kurt has 23 cards in his hand. 23 cards. That is over a third of his deck in his hand currently. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to at this point. If you're Speci, obviously you're gonna play down the P because again you need to guarantee that lore. The question is how much lore can you put on this turn, and if you can close it out next turn. Now I don't think Kurt has another P in his hand, so you could use that knowledge of wisdom the following turn if you're even able to be close enough to close it out.
Yeah, I don't know if the Pete is fast enough, right? I think Speci's only answer here is he needs to burn to 20. So I wonder if he does like Honey Marin with Goat, which would be 2, and then or maybe you do the knowledge and wisdom. Like I think the Pete's just going to be a little too slow because then Kurt can just quest to like 14, 15, put himself on lethal lore, and there's no way Speci's going to be able to answer that.
So let's break it down here. He has to ink
Please.
yet for a turn, right?
Correct. Correct. I think he can go to 7 this turn.
I was going to say it's unfortunate that he has to ink one of these cards, but he could play down the Pete. That's 3 ink. He could play
Hmm.
down the Honey Marin, gain 1 lore, go to 12, and he could put down that Magic Broom. Now that would be
True.
in total 3 plus lore, so he'd be at 15 potentially. Now, if Kurt does not have a Pete the following turn, he can play Knowledge of Gathering Wisdom, go to 17, and then with the amount of ink that he has, he could top deck into another 2 and steal the game like that.
True. Yeah, there is a line there. Specie is going to opt to go for it looks like the lore burn line. He does the knowledge and wisdom. He is going to go in on the Pete. We can both put down the broom. We could either put down the Honey Marin or we could do a broom and a fire of the cannons. I don't think a Pete was played last turn by Kurt, so
Yeah, there was no Pete. There's no Pete. So if Speci wanted to, he could activate any forms of actions. And it looks like he's going for the.
Honey Marin. So he'll go to 14. His opponent cannot interact with his board next turn because all of Green Emerald Steel's removal is action based. So if both of these quests, we'd go to 16. We essentially would need 2 knowledge and wisdom off the top. A single goat bounce would use all our ink, and that would only get us to 18.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, instead of activating it there, I mean, it does make sense because if you do get a Pete played the following turn, then it just becomes a dead card.
Hmm.
But that Magic Broom would have been 1 extra lore. Now you would have had to ink another card in your hand. Would have been the goat or the fox. But I mean, I'm not sure if that does make too much of a difference. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I kind of like your line too. I mean, it's all relying on some form of top deck, right? He's
Yeah.
still going to have to see the card, but I like your line because if you put, you'd have 3 characters out, right? 3, so you could quest a 3. You'd go from 12 to 15. Knowledge and wisdom would put you to 17. A goat bounce would get you to 19. So you would still need one. I mean, he's going to have to draw into it regardless. So I guess it's kind of a gambler's choice, so to speak. But we'll see if it pays off.
Yeah, it's one of those scenarios where when you do come down to either you win next turn or you don't win next turn, I think that's when it's okay or it just makes sense to go in on on the play that is very low on hitting because it's very high risk, high reward.
Yeah. Well, actually, hold on. Let's see. If we had done that line, so we'd have 3 characters on board at 12 lore. They quest for 3. That's 15. Knowledge and wisdom is
In the hand.
17,
Hmm.
and then you just play Goat Marion. I think that would have won, right? Because Marion would get you 1 to 8, or no,
No,
no. I
you
think
would
we still need to
need
be able to bounce the
you would
Goat.
just need a goat. You could just play the goat and top deck another knowledge of wisdom.
Yeah. So he's gonna need a knowledge and wisdom regardless.
Yes, because right here, I guess he quests for 16, go to 17. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to tell right now. And
Let's see if he's
Kurt
on
here, I mean,
8.
it's funny, right? Like you would just assume, oh, okay, just put down some cards and quest and pass. But Kurt in this position again, what makes a good player is they don't think they have the win by any means. You don't think like that until the game's officially over. So he's still thinking very hard into exactly what he wants to do and thinking what Speci could do if he can even steal this game next turn.
Right. With the Pete in play, there's not a whole lot of offensive moves Kurt can do. So he essentially can just flood the board. He can't cast any of these actions. As you can see, it looks like he might be scooping them up to. I don't know what he's doing. He's just he's got to throw his whole hand out at once. Oh, is he showing?
I mean, he doesn't have.
And then
Is he
did he
scooping? I'm not sure what happened
concede?
here. Because he can go to 15, 16, play goat 17, bounce go to 18. Am I missing something? Maybe he
Yeah,
just.
I'm not. Well, and I'm not sure why he's showing his hand. Oh, he's playing. Oh, he's discarding everything. Okay, he's actually using the dock trigger to discard 20 plus cards to draw into something new.
He did want to
And
draw into that Pete, yep.
yeah, he wanted that Pete because he knows probably the only way he loses this is with a knowledge and wisdom. And now,
Wow.
even if Speci draws into it, that is going to shut it off. Thanks to our judge, Phil, for catching that. Yeah, I wasn't 100% sure what was going on with his hand. As we quest out for, I believe, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Go to 19.
Yeah, that Pete was pretty much the only thing that could have stopped Speci. We could see if he even draws it, because if he does, oh, my heart is going to break.
Yeah, I know. If he actually had the chance. Speci's trying to see now what I've gotten. And no,
Okay.
not yet. One more. We go into a broom. Oh, and he drew into
Oh
knowledge and wisdom. Would that have been
my.
enough? So if he
16,
two,
is it not enough?
18. I don't think it's still enough because the goat bounce is 7 and the knowledge and wisdom is 2. He would have needed 9 ink. So he still wouldn't have had it on board even if he had been able to play it out.
Yeah, because even if he did play that broom and he had it now, he still wouldn't have been able to activate it with the Pete. But if he didn't, that'd be 15. If I'm not mistaken, you can ink and then play the goat and play double wisdom. That would have been.
Well, so he would have been able to play the goat, which would have got him to 19, but he wouldn't have had enough to also bounce the goat if he spent 2 on
Mhm.
if he spent 2 on the knowledge and wisdom. So as heartbreaking as it was for Kurt to hit him with that Pete, I don't ultimately think it would have mattered. Gonna try to draw into something. Smee's not gonna help.
Yes, that is so crazy how. Yeah, I mean that turn with the broom, I mean, again, we obviously we know what happens with Pete, but I'm just thinking, man, I think that
Hmm.
broom would have been a game breaker, because if he didn't have to activate the knowledge of wisdom, again, we're just saying if he didn't have the Pete, and
Sure,
then
sure.
this turn he would have been able to play goat ink, go to 8 ink, and then play double wisdom, because he did end up drawing it, and I believe that's
Yeah.
the 20 lore.
So congrats to Kurt on that first game. Something Speci can take away from this game is that the Chromicon was 100% the right choice to just put on that gas pressure. He got within a turn's breath of getting there despite Kurt's overwhelming hand advantage and board presence. So I think if Speci gets that again in game 2, he needs to just slam those Chromicons as quick as possible and just try to get all that instant lore.
Yes, and while this game is, as they are shuffling up, please let me know when they finish up. I'm actually going to go ahead and just showcase the list that Kurt is using today, just because we did have those technical difficulties earlier. But for the people at home that can see, again, welcome. Thank you guys for everyone for joining us. Today we do have Kurt Spice versus Joe Speci Curley, NA and EU, battling it out. And Kurt just took game 1. It was such a nail biter. Rudrose, that game was crazy.
Well, and it was a lot closer than I thought, right? Like if you had shown someone a still image of, hey, this guy's got a third of his deck in his hand, and this guy's got like 4 cards, you would think, oh, well, I mean, this is going to be a blowout, right? But Speci kept it really close, much closer than I thought it would be.
Yes, that game was very good, and you can see why these players are here today playing because their skill level is just insane. I actually do have here, I wanted to showcase the accomplishments that Kurt Spice does have. He did get top 16 at the NA Championship. I actually was able to meet him. Super cool dude, super awesome guy, very good player. As you can see here, these tops that he have is no joke. And if I'm not mistaken, World Class Card Games just picked them up as well. So awesome pickup. Yeah, Kurt, very strong. What do you think of his performance this first game?
Oh, it was great. And he had such a good opening start with multiple Diablos that Speci probably felt pretty good. Hey, I've got Fire the Cannons. I'm going to take out that small one. Surely I've messed up your shift line. And Kurt's deck lived up to its name of the Baltimore Ravens because he had, I think, 4 or 5, maybe even 6 Ravens total in those starting turns. Yeah, Kurt played it very, very not only did he play it well, that line with "I'm going to discard my entire hand for this dock. I'm going to throw out over 20 cards just to try to get to that Pete because I know that's how you can potentially steal this." That is next level thinking. I don't know if I would have thought to throw out that many cards on a dock.
Yeah, when we do have Kurt's list here on the screen, just so everyone can see back at home, and it's pretty casual, pretty normal as far as your green steel list. We do see that new P being implemented in this new style of green steel, which is pretty much the same as these past formats, where it's just focusing heavy on the Diablo package with that Prince John Ursula discard package. And honestly, those two cards, all those engines in this deck is just insane. And right now, since we are in a Pete meta, of course, why not play for Pete?
Oh, absolutely. And it was kind of impressive. Like I always knew Pete was strong and I knew it was strong in this matchup, but when Speci plays that specifically against Kurt, he essentially just turns his deck off. He says, okay, you can challenge with some of your kind of low strength characters, but you have no way to interact with a readied character on my board now.
Exactly. And then we also have Mr. Speci, the YouTube Lorcana content creator himself. He is running this Emerald Steel list, and this list is very spicy. It is very burny, but as you can notice, it's not ruby. It's actually more of an amethyst steel approach. You do have that removal package with Fire the Cannons, and I think he opted out to use this over your typical ruby amethyst just because of the card like Giant Cobra, where you can just gain 2 lore at the end. 2 lore when you discard a card, and that playing that card at towards the end of the game is just very strong. And of course, you have that gathering knowledge and the 4 Comercon. That's going to be the other burn aspect of this deck. What are your thoughts on this list?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that point because I had been debating that myself. Like, well, so what's the reason to run Amethyst Steel over Ruby Amethyst, right? Because they both kind of have a burn lore variant. And I think what Steel brings to the list is simply one Smee, is that there's not really anything in Ruby that kind of matches Smee's power level on turn 2, that quest for 2, this 3/3. And I think Pete, as we've mentioned it, is kind of the card of the show so far that he gives you this protection that there's just nothing in Ruby that does that. So I think that is absolutely the benefit. And of course, the new Giant Cobra as well is a form of burn lore that you have to put specifically in those colors.
Yes, and now we are going back to the game. As we can see here, they are shuffling mulligans. I'm assuming have been done, but now we're going to find out. And Mr. Speci is on the play. Let's see how it turns out for him this game.
All right, so starting hand, this does look a little weaker for Kurt. We do have the big Diablo. We actually don't have a 1-drop currently, which is great for Speci because this time he's starting with our Maleficent biding her time. I believe that's the version, which means he's going to get a few free turns of lore out of this.
Yes, and the good thing about having that 1-drop Maleficent is just in case you do, if he did open up that Diablo turn 1, you did have the Madam Mim Snake to bounce it back just to protect it. But right here,
Mhm.
with those two 1-drops that Speci has, this is going to be pretty much the perfect curve, if I'm not mistaken. Getting
Yeah.
that 3 lore, could potentially, if I'm not mistaken, 5 lore the following turn if he can't answer this Maleficent, which I don't think he can. That's just the perfect opening for this type of deck.
Yeah, Speci did exactly what I wanted him to do. You ink the snake. You have no intention of bouncing now, and now you're just going to put on so much pressure. Even if your opponent puts out, I mean, where they put out a Smee this turn, and then that Smee has to spend his time challenging instead of questing, you're completely okay with that.
Yeah, and what's really broken about Speci's hand is he also has that Chromacon again. So this one, it looks like, oh man, he's running out of cards. He does have that Chromacon to keep going, and then he also has the Pete that he can just play. Such a
Hmm.
very strong start for Speci compared to Kurtz. A little bit lower. He can play the Diablo the following turn or the Prince John if he chooses to. Probably the Prince John just because you can guarantee sinking that Lord Storm the Range on just because Speci does play fire the cannons. But
Yeah.
the race is on.
Absolutely. So Speci all the way up to 6. If he wants, he could drop the Pete this turn and trigger the Broom, but the Broom is under no threat from the Ursula. You could also put in the Chromacon and just start getting card draw and hand advantage. The Diablo, well, the Ursula is likely going to challenge the Maleficent here to turn the lore off, and we are going to go in on the Chromacon line and start gassing up our hand and get into that instant lore.
Yes, and that's what this deck is just meant to do, right? Having that early game pressure, kind of just ignoring any of the board presence that your opponent has. Maybe you can challenge with a Madam Mim Fox, but for the most part, again, you're just trying to just hit 20 real fast as you can, and having that Chromacon is going to be such a key factor to Speci's victory here. Now, Kurt can decide again to play that Diablo or that Prince John. Which one do you think he's going to go for?
He could also just do a straight storm onto the Broom because you assume the Ursula is going to challenge the Maleficent. The only problem with that is it doesn't build up his board presence, but it does deny Speci another card draw from that Broom. Otherwise, you do have one discard in hand. I feel like Diablo is probably the better answer because Speci just doesn't really have an answer to the Diablo other than the 2 copies of cannons. So if it were me, I'm picking Diablo, but we know what a good player Kurt is, so he's going to go for the first option, do the storm on the Broom.
Just like you called it, looks like he's going to slow down as much lore as he can and potentially draw more outs with that Ursula swinging into the Maleficent. Such a, well, I don't want to say broken play, but such a very strong play to counter out what Speci was doing early on. But like how you mentioned, it doesn't really push anything on his board. He still just has that one drop Ursula on there.
Yeah. But he does know the Ursula can at least take out the Diablo. So Kurt clearly knowing this Chromacons on the board, like, hey, I'm going to keep getting cards fed into my hand. What's more important is that I just slow him down as much as possible because the slower he goes, the more time I'm going to have to catch up.
Exactly. And that's what really all this matchup is about. Now, the unfortunate thing, though, is again, he doesn't have a singer on his board. Now, again, the Ursula could sing the Sudden Chill, but doesn't have a 3-drop singer to sing that Let the Storm the Rage on. And we do
Yeah.
see here him capitalizing off that exerted character, gaining that lore, and then putting just more lore pressure on with that Smee. I do like this play, holding on to the Pete.
Yeah, I like this a lot. The more bodies you can get out against green steel, especially this early, that they have to spend more and more removal. And again, when they have to pay for this removal, it's 100% fair. That's not a very good turn if they're having to just spend all their ink on a single removal spell. It's when they have a bunch of characters in play that can sing it for free that it really starts snowballing this advantage. So Speci's doing a good job of just overloading him early, saying, hey, Honey Mirren's instantly getting me lore, and then the Smee's going to put on extra lore pressure as well. As Speci goes dark, okay, he's back.
He's back. It's okay. He didn't put a 4th Pete in his hand or anything like that, people. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
yeah. We come back. He's got like a bunch of ruby cards in his hand. We're like, something doesn't seem right here. Prince John will hit the board finally. We don't have a 1-drop to follow up with. We can sing this Sudden Chill with the Ursula. It will leave the Diablo there, but we can at least somewhat limit what our opponent has.
I think that play is pretty smart just because, again, you do want to stop him from trying to put any lore pressure on the board. And he could have activated that the following turn and played that Pete using up all his ink. So I do
Yeah.
like that Sudden Chill play. Ignoring the Diablo, he is opting out to ignore for 1 Lord. Hopefully that doesn't come back and bite him.
Absolutely. Well, and Rip, you see how much he values that Pete, right? He just gave up an instant 2 lore in his hand, but he says, hey, what's more important is that clearly Kurt is trying to set up for some songs with this 3-cost Prince John.
Oof.
I need this Pete to come down to protect as we get another Chromacon so we can start putting on even more card pressure as we start with our first one and draw into a Broom.
Now, do you try to empty out your hand here? Obviously, he could keep 1 card in his hand, but do you just rather play the Broom and the Pete, or do you go Chromacon and the Pete?
So the greedy play is the Chromacon Pete, but I think you might try to overload his board here. I think maybe the better play, it's hard to say. If you go Pete Broom, he can't do anything to your board through songs. He can only challenge for a maximum of 2. And you could even ink the Chromicon if you're worried about him discard. Well, no, he can't make you discard, right?
Yeah,
Because
because
you
he
you
has
have a
Pete.
Pete out.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah,
here you do activate it and then draw a card, and potentially what you draw, you just ink it and just play the broom. Ooh, broom or the
exactly.
Chernobog. And just decided to go for the broom here.
Yep. So Pete's going to come in, protect everything. We're going to get another 4 lore once we quest out and go all the way to 12. This one is looking a lot better for Speci this turn,
Yes,
this
I'm.
game. It just shows you the difference between when your opponent can sing those cards versus when they have to pay for them.
Yeah, and if he didn't have the Pete, then Kurt would have been in an amazing spot, right? He would have been able just to sing a Let's Storm the Rage on, hardcast a Let's Sustain
Hmm.
the Rage on, play a Pete or something like that. But now all those cards basically become offline, and
Yeah.
because Kurt doesn't run any form of Benja removal, drawing a Pete here the following turn, because he is going to have 3 cards to draw the following turn. Potentially, if he gets rid of this Diablo right now, that's 4 cards. If he draws a Pete and stalls out another turn, I'd be worried right now if I was Kurt.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at it from Kurt's perspective, I mean, he essentially has 4 unusable cards in hand for this turn. It's still too early to get the Pete out. He can't shift it. You probably try to overload with bodies yourself, put out your own Smee, and then also, I think you might put out the Diablo, honestly, just because it attacks for more. You might end up needing that 2 strength to go in and hit something potentially.
Yeah, and this is the thing here, right? You kind of have to start trading, or at least
Yeah.
because you have to start getting rid of characters on his board. And to be honest here, with that Pete, again, what's really just gonna show you off is that Pete. So Kirk can just be thinking, okay, let me just set up a Diablo here. That's something on the board when I do shift onto there, because he has to be thinking too. In the scenario where Speci does draw another Pete, what's Plan B and what can Kurt do
Yeah.
while he's just playing around Pete as well?
He actually goes into the Smee. I thought he might take the quote unquote safer trade and just pick off the Diablo or maybe even send both into the Marion, but no, he wants to slow down that lore pressure. And I mean, I'm glad he slowed down the lore pressure, but I don't know. Do you like giving up 2 characters for that?
I think in this scenario, it's kind of funny how we predicted it certain things throughout the game already. And again, look how we're at that 12 lore threshold that I mentioned earlier, where when a deck
Mhm.
like this is already getting to that, well, now he's gonna go to 15. He's gonna go
Yeah.
to 15 lore. Um, that's red alarms for me there, just because you have just no way of stopping instant lore. The only thing that you can stop instant lore wise is having your own Pete. And here, right now, Speci is threatening 3 lore on board. He did draw into that dog, has those chromacons. This draw power is just insane.
Yeah. And he has, well, look, this is such a great line for Speci. He can ink the broom, you put the dock out, which is going to refill your hand to 2, and then you use the Chromacons on top of that. So you actually go to 4 in hand. And that way, if he gets any kind of bounce package, he can bounce and replay the Pete. Like, oh man, this line's going to be so good for him if he takes that.
Yes, and I'm thinking here that's probably what he has to do, right? Like he wants to get the dog down on board. Now, do you draw off the chromacons first or play dock?
I think you do dock first because otherwise you could potentially throw stuff out with the Chromacons you don't want to. He actually plays the broom. Okay, so he's more content to use his ink this way. He's going to draw 2. Even if he gets a bounce at this point, he won't really be able to use the goat. Gonna draw again, and we got more instant lore with the knowledge and wisdom, which we can still use this turn. We've only spent 3 of our 5 ink.
Yeah, and I do that Benja is just unfortunate to draw. Now, I mean, it is a 2 lore body on the board, and it doesn't die to Storm the Rage on, so it might not be completely useless here.
So you quest out, you'll go to 15. I think maybe you just drop the Benja. Because if your opponent spends 3 ink next turn just putting a Pete out, you don't care about that. That's not going to answer your board. They have to start hitting you with removal. And like you said, the Benja, I mean, you could put the Smee out too, right? They essentially have the same body. So I guess this.
I mean, I think here you go the Wisdom, right, to shut off the P play. Don't play
Well, that's what I
Smee.
say. Even if your opponent spends 3 ink next turn putting the Pete out, that means they're not answering your board. So I think
True.
you're okay if he does that.
True that. True that. I feel like that kind of just solidified it, or at least makes a dead card
Yeah.
in your hand. But I mean, no, I kind of spaced out for a second and just realized, oh wait a minute, Kurt's at 0 lore.
Yeah. Well, and so this is one of the challenges of Lorcana, and it often happens when you go second, right? That not only does he have to continually answer Speci's board, he then would have to find his own win condition to somehow get to 20.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. He's not playing any Lucky Dimes or Tamatoa, so that lore is not going to
Exactly.
be gained instantly. And unfortunately, here, I think the best thing you can do is probably attack into some bodies and then activate two Let's Surrender Rage on. But then again, you're not really advancing your board state.
Yeah. And he doesn't really have a way to. He doesn't have. I guess he's got a strength. So we can shift the Diablo to start. That's at least another singer. He essentially has to wipe. Because Speci has 3 lore in hand. So he has to wipe out enough characters so that Speci can't go to 17 on board,
Yeah,
which I just don't think he has.
he
But
can activate 3 action cards this turn, which is very strong, but is it enough?
so Diablo will take out the broom. If he could hit he definitely needs to get rid of this Smee, but then he still has 2 more characters he has to get rid of.
Would
Well, no, 3. He needs to get rid of 3 characters still.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Muses would have been so strong here, but he just doesn't have enough ink to do it all.
Yeah, if he'd spent all his ink on the Muses, he'd get to bounce maybe one thing, but so there's the strength on the Smee. And then looks like our Smee's going to take out the Pete. Speci still with 3 on board is going to go to 18,
And
drop that
still
knowledge and
go, and he
wisdom,
drew
and
the
that's going to be
P. And
GG.
that's gonna be GG's. Bessie does take game 2. Kurt take game 1. So
Woo!
Kurt is gonna go on the play game 3. While these opponents shuffle up their decks, I actually do want to promote, as everyone at home can see this on the screen. Look at this beautiful website. Rudrose, have you been to this awesome LCCC.live website, aka Inkdex? Tell the viewers at home what this website consists of.
Oh, absolutely. This has been a great partnership with Inkdex, and Pavel has done a great job getting it on there. It's a much more convenient way to just all the LCC action you want to follow, just go to the site. It shows you the date of the matches. It shows you what stream it's going to be on. It is your one-stop shop for all info on the LCCC. I know in like kind of the first round, that was one of the complaints is that, oh, it was kind of all over the place and you'd have to go to Twitch. Who's streaming it today? Just go to this site. It's a great link. It's a great partnership, and anything you could want, it's going to be on there. So it is your home for all the legendary cross-continental action.
Yes, and you can see all the deck lists on here as well. Remember, these, at least for the first couple of rounds, the players can change their deck. So these deck lists do change every week. And again, just like how you mentioned, Rose, you can visit this website and watch all the games previously that haven't happened already. And then we do have the games there on the site scheduled, so you can never miss out. If you have any questions, everything about the LCCC, it's all on this website. Again, lccc.live.com, aka the Inkdex. Such an awesome website. And yes, I do recommend everyone to check it out. But wow, what a crazy match. 1-1. 1-1, and Kurt is on the play for game 3.
And it just shows you how important the opening is, right? Part of the reason Speci got off to such a good start, not only did he get to go first, but he had the Maleficent for 2 lore, and Kurt did not have a 1-drop. Even the baby Diablo can at least pressure it, right? And then now maybe Speci's forced to quest with it and then bounce it with the snake to protect it. But it just shows you miss that 1-drop, and then suddenly the whole momentum of the game changes.
Yes, and I do have our beautiful faces back here on the screen. Again, I do
Hooray!
apologize everyone for the technical difficulties that we had earlier on, but it happens. It's just, I guess it's the caster's curse. I haven't casted a couple games in a
Yeah.
while, but just wanted to introduce myself again to everyone. Welcome everyone to the stream. I'm glad everyone who is watching right now, the 100+ viewers that we have. Hello to the Lorcana Twitch community. I am Rip Lungs Create TCG, and I'm here with Rude Rose. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Mr. Rudrose TCG, thank you for watching. We are happy to have you folks here. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but hey, it wouldn't be a stream if we didn't have some tech issues. And the most frustrating part, of course, is that we practiced it all and we set it all up beforehand, and it's working fine. And then you go to actually broadcast, it's like, all right, now a bunch of stuff doesn't work.
Unfortunately, that is what happens, but it's okay. We're here. We're going to game 3. Again, thank you for casting this game with me. Shout out to Pavel. Shout out to Pixelborn. Shout out to all the players here playing today and everyone back at home watching. I do appreciate everyone for tuning in. And just in case you missed out or missed out the first couple games, this VOD will be uploaded on YouTube within the next 28 24 to 48 hours. So we are going to game three. Let's go see how they're doing over there.
Absolutely. So we've got Kurt versus Speci with our great judge Phil watching as well. Kurt does have a one drop this time with the Diablo, but he does not have the Diablo he can shift into. However, in spite of that, he still has a Smee and a Prince John. So Kurt's opening is looking a little stronger this time, whereas Speci is a little linear. He does have at least the Maleficent and the Snake he can protect, or maybe the Smee, depending on how he wants to do it. So this is at least looking a little better for Kurt than the last match did.
Yeah, and he has that Chromacon again, which is going to be, again, such a key card in this matchup because if you notice, Speci is always pretty much running on an empty hand. What's keeping him in the game is that draw power that he has from that card.
Yeah, since that card came out in, I think it was set 5, right? I think it was the same set as the Daisy Duck. And that was why that Amber Amethyst list was so appealing, was that normally the issue with aggro is that, yes, you can get a lot of lore quickly, but you just burn up all your resources and then you're top decking. But the Chromacon says, no, 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 you'll never be in top deck mode again. Let me give you a nice healthy hand.
Yes, and what's going to be clutch for Kurt this game is he's going to have to open up again that Diablo line. Just that's going to be the best form of momentum that he has just to go against the pressure that Speci does bring on. Because we noticed last game what happens if you don't open it up.
Absolutely. So we have Honey Marin. That could potentially be a good card to put down turn 2 if this Diablo goes exerted. I'm assuming we're going to go on this Maleficent. Hope our opponent doesn't have like a Shift Storm line, which currently they don't. So unless Kurt top decks it, this Maleficent should be safe this turn.
What I do like about Kurt's hand right now is he does have that Smee. So setting up it's going to be a little bit slow. Again, unfortunate depending on when Speci decides to play that Chromacon, but you can get a double sudden chill off yourself in the next
Yeah,
2 turns.
absolutely. So I'm assuming Speci is going to protect this Maleficent with the Snake. He could also go in with his own Smee or a Honey Marin to potentially gain lore. Probably, I feel like it's a little too early for the Honey Marin. You probably want the bigger body. What do you think here? Do you like the Snake to protect Maleficent, or would you rather see the Smee and get your board a little wider?
What's the unfortunate about Snake is it's such a low tempo play because you kind of just lose
Yeah.
everything that you put back. Now, if you're Speci here, do you assume that Kurt is baiting you on thinking that, are you thinking that he doesn't have the Diablo here?
Do go in on the Snake. Yeah, yeah, of course it's hard to read your opponent's mind, but you would assume that it would be very unorthodox if Kurt had the Diablo and just didn't do it. And of
Yeah,
course, you could always try to throw someone a curveball. But and speaking of which, right on time, the bird arrives.
the bird
Oh man! And
arrives.
now with this shift, he can do a shift into a Prince John. Like, ooh, he's got a lot of options here.
That is what you call top decking in this game. Such a crazy power play that's gonna happen right now because of the how powerful Diablo is. Right now, I remember back then a lot of people were asking for a ban on this card. Were you one of those people, Rudrose, or at least a nerf on this card?
Oh yeah. Oh, it was very annoying. It was very obnoxious, and we saw it in game 1 that when you don't have an answer to it, oh my goodness, it just draws you cards endlessly. So yeah, I definitely didn't enjoy playing against it.
Yeah, now it kind of seems like with the meta, the way the meta has shifted with all this steel going around, it's not, I don't want to say falling off, but it's such a weird way to look at it, right? Because there's so many people playing cards like Let the Storm the Rage On, and there's so much removal for cards like Oswald, but yet Diablo just stays to be such a strong card, or at least favored when it comes to these higher skilled players.
Absolutely. Well, and part of that too was that the Diablo Bucky line in particular just
Hmm.
felt especially backbreaking. As we do see Diablo shift, we'll have to give up our another version of Sudden Chill, but I think we are just going to quest at this point. And we did at least get one draw off the first discard that Pete gave us from the Prince John. So the snake can bite the Smee, but it would trade with it. I don't know how good that feels. And so here's an instance where you get to see the power of this Diablo, right? You know, in your opponent's entire deck, there are 2 cards that can answer this. 2. So that bird is sticking around, which means you never have to worry about card draw again.
What Spazzy does have going for him currently is the low amount of cards that Kurt does have in his hand. Now that Diablo is just very strong again because that's what makes Emerald Steel such a good deck is once you empty out your hand, you slowly refill it. But
Hmm.
the downside of it is you kind of fall back a little bit on lore. But Kurt has already established 2 extra bodies to be with that Diablo, so he is in a good spot. But Speci not in a bad spot himself. He does have 6 cards in his hand.
Yeah, so here's the one time where the Chromicon you may want to consider not using it is that there's occasions like this when your opponent is struggling for resources and you don't necessarily just want to refill his hand. If he puts Chromicon out this turn, he's going to give him 2 more cards, which means Kurt starts his next turn with 5 cards in hand. So this might be an instance where Speci just maybe wants to play the board. Maybe you put out the Maleficent or the Chernabog with the Smee and just set up a bunch of board pressure, hope your opponent doesn't have their removal spells, and maybe you can get some advantage that way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's gonna be an issue for Kurt right now is he's already gotten rid of a couple of action card songs in his hand. He doesn't have to thin throughout his deck a little bit. That Ursula just doesn't do anything in this matchup in particular. And here Speci just opting out to trade in, which I do like that because you kind of protect your characters, and now you establish 4 lore on board.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we know, again, Kurt doesn't have any songs he can sing this next turn, so he's not really going to be able to do much unless he can top deck one.
Exactly. Let's see what he draws here. Oh, these
Oh,
top decks. He is just he is just top decking these cards like it is nothing, Rudrose. That's exactly what he needed in this scenario. And he gets a free draw, which is just such a good play.
yeah, that
Oh,
if Kurt goes on to win this, that could be the play that wins the game. Like, ask for it and you shall receive, Rip, because that Storm Rage on was very timely. As we now get a second Diablo, which means now it might be time for that Chromicon, because just like game one, your opponent is not going to have any trouble having cards in their hand at this point.
yes, unfortunately with that Storm the Rage on falling with that Diablo, you couldn't ask just for a better emergency what your deck needs in this spot right here because being on the play is such an advantage in this game. It does need to be a little bit more balanced out. But the reason why decks like this Amethyst Steel one that we're looking at right now is just because if you can just get away with a bit of lore early on, it kind of just
Hmm.
starts snowballing here. But the unfortunate thing here is there's just no way Speci can answer these Diablos, and he's just not drawing the
Yeah.
fire of the cannons that he needs.
And we saw what a warping card Diablo was in set 4 when it came out, because in a situation like it demands an answer. Like if this bird just sits there drawing card after card, the chances of you winning are incredibly slim, especially in what's an aggressive deck like this. That this deck does so good when it gets out ahead, as we just saw last game, Rip. But you're seeing right here when it starts to fall behind, what does it do? It just struggles to keep up.
Fortunately, he does have that Chromicon again. He has opened it up with it all 3 games, so that's going to be the little fuel that he has just to give him a little boost into potentially drawing those fire the cannons or maybe a Pete just so he can keep putting more pressure on the board here. I guess he's just figuring out what exactly he wants to ink and what lines of plays that he has available to him.
Yeah, I wonder if you just go to the wall here and just say, okay, I can't outlast you, so maybe I just try to get as much instant lore pressure as I can possibly get and just hope you don't draw into removal spells. I mean, I don't know. Do you see a better line for him here?
If he hasn't inked yet, which he has not, the most he can go up to is 4. So you could get that snake down and that chromacon. You protect the Smee. That's probably your best line of play. If you don't want to protect the Smee, you can get an instant lore with that Honey Marin as well, acting like a pseudo goat, and he has to trade with the Smee. It's really hard to tell right now in this position.
Yeah, I think you don't go in on the
Oh,
snake just because, like you said, it just feels so slow. It resets your board presence. I think this is the right call where you just want to get as many characters out there as possible.
and
But
Kurt
yes,
just
you saw on Kurt's
yep.
side, he drew the perfect answers.
He's just finding those removal tools exactly when he needs them, and it's exactly what he's gonna need. And with those 2 Diablos out on the board and the amount of ink that he has, he can just deploy everything that he has in his hand. To be honest,
Hmm. If he wants to be patient, he can even just put out this big singer Ursula. He and really take advantage of it. He doesn't need to, but
yeah, and the reason why that would also be a strong play is just because there's not really any form of removal that Speci could do on that. Might be a little bit overkill. Let's see what he decides to do. Still, oh, and that third
oh
Diablo does
man,
hit. It really is the Baltimore Ravens over here.
it is. Yeah, Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry are coming down to just shove this football down your throat. Okay, now I think you just give up on the Ursula plan. Put out your next Diablo And this is looking over very early, Mr. Rip.
Yes, I mean, it sucks to see it, but that is what makes this game very beautiful, right? It's just because you can just tell when the deck is going to be in an advantage with such an early start. Although the lore is compared 4-0, just the board presence that Kurt has, and then us knowing what he has in his hand to combat Speci's board. I mean, Speci's already out of cards in his hand, so it's going to be
Exactly.
hard to him to come back from this.
Absolutely. And so we do go in on double Ursula power. Nothing, of course, to rip with the small 2-drop one, but our big singer one is ready to roll. And yeah, this is Speci is looking like in a lot of danger, but you see the power of the singing mechanic there, right? He spent 5 ink on the 2 Ursulas, but then he also played 5 ink worth of songs because you can sing them for free. So that's 10 ink. He used 10 ink that turn, and he's going to refill right back up with these Diablos. Oh my goodness.
He does draw that Pete, and that Ben just needs to be a combo that comes in this deck, but he fortunately cannot ink and play both of them. Well, he could destroy the Turnabog, ink a card, and potentially play 2 more characters on the board, getting him to a guaranteed 9 lore potentially next turn. 9-10
By the
lore.
way, yeah, and Kurt's just up to a casual 7 cards in hand after all that, by the way, thanks to that Diablo draw power.
Man, he's really trying to make people hate Diablo again, is what it looks like from
Yeah,
this point.
right?
What are your thoughts on Kurt choosing to play Emerald Steel if you know that Sapphire Steel right now, if not, is considered to be right now tier 0 in the meta? What's making Kurt saying, I'm still going to play Diablo either way?
So I haven't tested it myself, but I have actually heard from some other players that Emerald Steel has a decent matchup against Sapphire Steel in that if you can make them discard enough,
Mm-hmm.
as long as they don't see like a Flaversham or like heavy draw line, you can actually kind of stall them out. And those decks also, they don't run anything that can challenge an evasive character, so they
True.
are forced to use spot removal to get rid of them.
And there is that Fire of the Cannons. Now, it's a card that seems to be falling off in the meta with everyone playing Let's Storm the Rage on. Me personally, in my Sapphire and Steel builds, I am running Fire of the Cannons because I do respect those Diablos. And it's such a
Yeah.
clean way to answer it, but unfortunately, he has just 2 more on the board.
At least he's going to get rid of one bird, but yeah, many those ravens they flock together, so he will be backed up by many more here very shortly.
It seems to be a bit of confusion there. Is he going to be able to draw?
I think he's challenging the Prince John with the
Oh, okay. There
Chernabog.
you go.
Okay, yeah.
Man, having to give that one lore just to stop that Prince John feels very bad.
It does. Well, and so this was something I thought was kind of cool about the new Ruby Steel like Mushu card was that in the past challenging was just what you were doing to prevent yourself from losing, but it
Mm-hmm.
never actually helped you win the game, right? You were
Exactly.
just challenging to keep them off lore. And so I thought that deck and that card was really cool because it's like, hey, actually it helps you win. Like challenging characters now can get you towards victory, which is a really neat idea.
Challenging. A lot of that does not happen nowadays. A lot of it is just sending cards sideways and singing very strong removal tools.
Mhm.
And Kurt here deciding just to go wide, trying to close out this game as quickly as he can, just putting more bodies on the board with that removal in his hand as well. He's just feeling very confident.
Absolutely. So we see 2 birds and Ursula. I believe we're inking that Cricky, and we're just going to quest. Like, he could double sing with this Ursula, and he doesn't even feel the need to. Just says, what are you going to do about it?
We do see here Speci drawing into a dock, which I mean at this point is the best thing that you could draw because now you just kind of want to go all gas.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see what he does draw here. Does draw the 1-drop Diablo. Can play that Cobra if he decides to pitch a card and gain 2 lore
Yeah.
instantly.
He's on 6 ink, so if he does the Cobra, that's 3. He could then still put out the Diablo or bounce with the Snake if you wanted. Maybe you bounce the Pete back and try to hit these actions, but your opponent is showing you, hey, I'm just going to quest out in front of you. What are you going to do about it? So Speci also is kind of in challenge mode. The nice thing is he can at least challenge that Ursula. He can challenge one of the 2 Ursulas and get rid of them and keep the Pete.
I mean, something is better than nothing, right? Just at this point, you just can't afford to even interact with the board because your game plan is just to gain as much lore as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, you're shifting away from your game plan, and then which means you're not going to be winning that way. So Speci opts to quest with the Pete. That makes me think he's going to bounce it with the snake and replay it, which will help protect his board. Although, again, I don't think Kurt has much interest in even hitting his board. Kurt could have very easily double sung Storm last turn to get rid of this Pete. And the fact that he didn't even bother just tells me Kurt's thinking, nah, I'm just going to go faster than you. I'm going to make you chase me for once.
Yeah, with the amount of options that he has in his hand and all the removal tools, I mean, you don't really even have to care about the lore because the lore deficit isn't even there. It's 6 to 7 right now, or
Yeah.
8 to 7, I should say now. I mean,
He'll go up
Speci
to
here,
8.
yeah, he's trying his best.
Yeah, he's trying. And again, this deck has some fun tools. It has the card draw, but when you're on 0 in hand and your opponent's about to go up to what, 10? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 13 cards in hand, yeah, one might say you're at a disadvantage.
Yes, and again, I've never seen this Emerald Steel deck lately have this many cards in his hand. Crazy how
No.
those Diablos can just get out of control here.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, it shows you the power of them, right? That, hey, this is why people were so adamant about answering them so early when he first came out, because you can see what happens if you don't.
Yes, makes me want to play copies of Grab Your Sword. So everyone, if all these people who do fear Emerald Steel, throw some copies of Grab Your Sword, some Fire the Cannons to help you combat those Diablos because I feel like this deck is going to be on the rise.
Yeah, and we actually see the first interaction of the vanish mechanic. So for those of you who don't know, the giant cobra has a keyword called vanish, which means if it's chosen by an action of your opponents, you instantly banish it, regardless of what the action does. So even though 2 damage normally wouldn't be enough to take out a 4/4 body like the cobra, because of the vanish keyword, it does get banished from that.
And here we just see Kerr answering, taking away Speci's board one by one, leaving him with no cards in hand, nothing on board. And unfortunately, I think this is lights out for Speci.
Absolutely. I never enjoy calling a match early, Rip, but this is one of those that, like, this was over 4 turns ago, unfortunately.
And it really started off fair, right? Like Speci had a very strong board early on. It's just really
Yeah.
once he top decked that Diablo, that's where things really went wrong. And that's just the name of the game sometimes, right? It's just if your opponent draws it, they draw it.
Absolutely. So we get a 1-cost Chernabog. That's probably not going to help us much. We'll do a Chromacon, which means Kurt's going to get. Well, I mean, we could play this Fox.
Guaranteed 2 lore. Well, you can put 2 lore on the board. It's better than nothing. But right now, Kurt is presenting, if I'm not mistaken, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
7,
8.
8, 9, 10. He's on lethal, so the Fox can take out one of the big Ursulas. And I believe it'll put him down to 9 because he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the Pete's worth 2. So yeah, he has 9 on board right now. I'm assuming that the Fox has to challenge.
And does challenge to enter at least one body on the board. It's just
I
what you
I
have
guess
to
it hit the
do.
Diablo, or no, he put 2 on it. Okay, so I'm assuming it's hitting one of the Ursulas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I'm running Ursulus. And it's all Speci can do here. Kerr is just going to draw his turn. And more than likely, just start turning everything sideways and answer Speci's board. Or like you said,
Yeah.
probably doesn't even have to.
Yeah, he can just quest out and ignore him and say, all right, especially cannot answer that with what he has, but he can also just take his time and, yeah, double sing that, clear the board, quest out anyway. All right, I need someone to pass Speci the old lap, be prepared, out of color so we
The
can.
only card that will save him in this spot right there is
Yeah.
a be prepared. And here Kurt just turning everything sideways, trying to seal the deal already. How unfortunate for him to top deck that Diablo early on, and just again seeing that removal back to back is just the cards were just in Kurt's favor. I do really like how this match started out, but just like that, the Diablo can just get things out of control.
Yeah, Speci does see Pete, which was the man of the hour earlier, but it's a bit too late for that card. We will get at least one final giant Cobra, so we're going to go out with our dignity and go up to 10 lore. But it looks like this one is going to go to Mr. Kurt,
Got
as he
there
will ultimately
halfway.
take it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that wraps it up. Kurt takes the victory 2-1. What a crazy game that was. I'm going to go ahead and have the winning list here on the screen for everyone to see. The Baltimore Ravens, Kurt Spice, running the good old Emerald Steel. again
Mm.
showing how powerful the bird is, along with that discard package with Prince John and Ursula. And then again having these songs that are just everywhere in the meta right now. Let's Us Storm the Rage On and Strength to the Raging Fire. And of course we are in that Pete meta. This deck is just very strong, very consistent. Wow, that game was crazy, Rudrose.
Hello.
Hello, what's going on,
Hey,
Speci?
How's it
uh,
going?
Man,
How's
that
it
was
going?
it's going good. It's going good. We just want to say that match was insane. We really enjoyed how that match three started out. We felt like you had a really good start to that, and then unfortunately he did top deck that Diablo, and things did go down from there. But what an amazing performance still from your awesome burn deck. What are your thoughts on the match? How everything went down?
Well, I won the die roll, so that was pretty good. I felt if I lost the die roll, I kind of didn't have much chance. I
Mm-hmm.
tested the matchup a lot, to be honest. I think I won like 2 times going second out of maybe like 40 games. I tested it a lot.
Oh
I really
wow.
wanted to win this one, so it was good fun, man. I'm happy. I'm pretty happy with how I played. As soon as I lost game one, I knew it was probably toast. But I'll definitely be interested to look back on game one because it was very, very close. I wonder if there were some micro decisions. I definitely drew very well to begin the game. Um, like I could have gone Maleficent on turn one if I knew I was top decking the fire the cannons for two, but I didn't know that. He hit three of the four one
Mm-hmm.
drops in his deck, which was crazy. Like I never saw this line in any of my testing. But I got very, very close. Basically, the problem that I ran into was that my game plan is with the Chromicons.
Mm-hmm.
Two is like the sweet spot I found as well in this matchup. I need to have a turn where it's like I go Pete and a bunch of one drops, like go very, very wide. But my hand just didn't really enable it. Like I had to go Pete, and I think it was like only Honey Marin and play like Gathering Knowledge. And it just wasn't quite enough. I think if I hit like Cobra off the top of the last few draws as well, think I could have got there. Obviously, I had to discard the whole hand with Doc to find the Pete, but realistically, he was always going to find a Pete. I just kind of said, well, he's going to have a Pete, so I've got to play the Gathering Knowledge now. Unfortunately, didn't quite get there, but I'm pretty happy with how I played overall. So, yeah, it
Yeah,
was fun.
I think that first game was such a nail biter because towards the end of it, we were just me and Rude Rose were just talking about all the different lines that you could get to close out the game, and you did end up drawing the second Knowledge of Wisdom, but Kurt unfortunately had that Pete. You did mention in this matchup how the Chromacon is very important and the Diablos were just very crucial there. Is that why you have the two copies of the Fire Cannons, and then going forward, would you include up to four copies of Fire the Cannons?
I actually, honestly, I don't even know how much impact Fighter Cannons ended up making in this
Mm-hmm.
matchup, to be honest. Like, if Diablo sits, Diablo sits, because he's just drawing a ton of cards anyway. Like, at some point, it kind of doesn't matter how many cards he's got. Like, obviously, it does. Fighter Cannons, I played in this deck previously. Last set, I played like 3 or 4. I played Befuddles. The big problem with Fighter Cannons really at the moment is it doesn't hit Bell. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously, coming into this top 8, I knew the 7 people I could be playing against. And I felt like
mm.
Fire Cannons would be putting in some pretty good work against Artabax and LD as well as this matchup because they were on Captain Hooks. But to be fair, I would have got bamboozled because they swapped out the Captain Hook for the Sticky Mickey.
Mm.
Fire Cannons wouldn't have done much there, to be honest. It definitely helped. Obviously, I felt like I needed to find it, but yeah, I don't know. Like Fire Cannons is definitely very good, no doubt about it. But like when it's a Bell meta, it's not so good. I think like if you could befuddle Bell, that's one thing I've been thinking about recently. I would love befuddle, but because she costs 3, you can't do that. And Fire Cannons is bad into Bell too.
Makes sense. Rudros, do you have any thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. So first of all, congratulations to Kurt. Really appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you to
That-
both gentlemen for
Yeah.
your fun match. Speci, I'll kind of follow up on that with your list. Seeing something like this Diablo and how it kind of took over the game, would that make you want to put more removal based options in your list? Or do you prefer it as a, you know what, if they see that, they see that, I'm just going to go for this burn lore strategy and just try to go faster?
Um. Yeah. I mean, you could play more Fire Cannons. Fire Cannons is obviously an interesting one because it's incredibly efficient. Um. I was definitely like when I was submitting the deck, I was like, yeah, Fire Cannons, Doc. They were like the two things I wasn't so sure in how many to play. I was like, could I reduce the count of Benja perhaps? Um, I feel like Benja is just a very good card to have in your deck, even if you just ink it every time, which
Hmm.
obviously I did in this matchup. But if you play against Sapphire players and they see you don't have Benja, they don't have to respect it. So I felt like I wanted to have Benja still, because Sapphire was still the most likely matchup. But you definitely could trim some of those away to fit in more fighter cannons. You do need to be careful with uninkables. I could also see like going down to 2 docks.
Yeah.
But Doc was very good in other matchups. It obviously didn't really do anything that much here, but yeah, Fighter Cannons is a good card, but it also, there's turns where you really wish that Fighter Cannons was ink, and there's turns you really wish that Fighter Cannons was like a one drop. I think you could look at like playing fairy ships. I think they're kind of interesting. Like the Mickey one cost. You've got so many good options, really. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's great. I appreciate that insight. Kurt, let me turn it to you. I appreciate you being patient. Once again, congratulations on your big win. So, when you're running this Emerald Steel, this is pretty much what we've seen out of Emerald Steel for the last 2 sets. Your only real new card is the Big Pete Space Pirate. Why pick that card? Do you think he's actually really effective? Is it more you're just not really sure what else to put in there? What made you pick the Pete?
Yeah, thank you. I think Pete is a great new addition to the deck. I, in fact, went from 3 copies in round 1 to 4 copies in the second round.
Nice.
He's just, being inkable makes him very flexible. Typically, this deck wants to play Ursula, Diablo, or Prince John on turn 3, depending on the matchup. But sometimes you can still, especially on the draw against like some steel aggressive decks, you can play Pete on turn 3. They can't strength you. Then turn 4, you can shift it. You get the challenge into one of their 3 strength questers. Pete only takes 2 damage. Then they can't follow up with another 3 damage. They have to do at least 4 to take him out, since you only
Yeah.
took 2 off that exchange there. So that just gives the deck like a really nice dimension that it has. All of the pieces being inkable. So when you do have your good draws of Diablo or Prince John and doing their thing very quickly like you want, then you just ink the Pete's. But yeah, there's a lot of blue steel, and it seemed like there was more blue steel going into the winners bracket. So
Yeah.
I went up to 4 Pirate Pete's, and yeah, he's great. He lets you Pete again almost because he stops your opponent from singing their songs as well.
Yeah, I kind of forgot he had that text with the song cancellation. I always just thought of him for the resist, but I like that line you described with, okay, you have the 3 drop, cancels actions that turn, and then he follows up and says, oh yeah, you can't sing again anyway. So that seems very effective.
Yeah, it's a good way to take tempo back on the draw. The Space Pirate doesn't do too much against Speci's deck, and it's mostly ink, but you can just turn a Pete into a 2 quester late in the game when you don't have anything else really going on.
Yeah.
I
Rip,
think the
go
fact
ahead.
they can shift
sorry.
and sing Bruno is quite nice as well. Like Bruno's kind of awkward if you're not playing Beast, and obviously you've got Doc in there. So the fact you've like actually got a card that could shift it and sing Bruno to like get rid of I don't know, like a Tamato so shiny, for example. I think that's like another nice element about the card.
Yeah, I try to have at least a few Bruno singers in here. I played Lucifer round 1, and then I switched Lucifer to Cricky, because Blue Steel aggressive draws with Mr. Shmee were sometimes a problem. Just 'cause there's like a Pluto or something like that in the mix as well. And I know that some of the Blue Steel players had the opportunity to change their deck. Um, yeah, and so Cricky's just kind of another like when things go bad, inkable option, and he can let you challenge the board to turn you play him, and then be able to sink Bruno or Quest for 3 after that.
Very good. Rip. Rip, did I lose you?
Sorry there. Yeah, I want to say congrats, Kurt, for the match. Very well played. It looked like you were playing Sapphire and Steel with the amount of cards that you had in your hand, showcasing how broken Diablo is. What was interesting is I expected you actually to be on some sort of Amber Steel just because of the amount of Sapphire Steel that there is right now in the meta. And with everyone playing Let's Storm the Rage on, what made you want to stick with Diablo? Is it just because you just want to force your opponent to have to enter the Diablo? If they have it, they have it?
Well, so I think with Amber Steel, Cinderella is a card that went from one of the best singers to no longer the best singer on turn 1, now that there's Belle. So Cinderella lost a lot of equity in the metagame. There are still a couple of Cinderella decks that are decent, but they more have to lean into songs for Cinderella to be effective. Amber does have some tools to like grow your strength and gain an advantage against steel decks. But I just feel like now Amber Steel has a really tough time with Sapphire Ruby. And I felt like Emerald Steel was a little bit better at going toe to toe with the Sapphire decks as you get into the later stages of the game. You certainly don't have the questing power that Amber has, but because the Sapphire decks got such a boost in speed, I feel like if you do want to play, a non-Sapphire Steel mid-range deck, then Emerald is a good option to kind of keep up with Sapphire, both in their card draw and having Prince John to discard their cards as well. Especially with Tamatoa, they pretty much always have cards to discard. So yeah, I think Emerald Steel is still pretty decently positioned.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. This deck is just very strong. Again, showcasing how powerful that Diablo can be if it's just left unanswered. And what really Speci had going for him was just that card draw. And then that game three, you did end up drawing into that Diablo. What were your thoughts there in that game three when you drew into him? Were you thinking if you didn't draw into him, you were going to be in a bad spot?
Yeah, I mean that improved my situation a lot. So my plan, I had Prince John and two sudden chills and a
Hmm.
strength of the Raging Fire, I believe, and then I drew the Diablo. So the Diablo just kind of gave me another way to draw cards and add another singer to the board without having to risk the John, which was really good. I already had the two sudden chills to draw cards, but the Diablo just being a guaranteed draw just let me use one of the sudden chills to shift it. And yeah, it ended up mattering a lot when he followed it up with a Chromicon, and it just makes it so that way I can find whatever pieces I need to lock him out of the game once he gets the Chromicons going.
Yeah, those
Nice.
Diablos were crazy.
I have a question for you too, Kurt, and Speci, if you want to weigh in on this as well, I'd love your opinion. So obviously in set 4 with the Bucky shift line and all the Floodborns, Emerald Steel was very much thought of as a discard deck, but nowadays really your only discard is what, Hypnotize and Sudden Chill. When you think of Emerald Steel as you're building it and playing it, do you think of it as a discard deck, or do you more see it as like a kind of song control card draw deck? How do you think of it?
Yeah, I would say a little more of the latter. It's definitely a song control deck, and the discard just kind of gives you another element of control. Having all inkable discard pieces is nice when you do have to answer the board for the first, 2 through 5 turns of the game,
Mm-hmm.
and you may not end up using any of the discard until later in the game. You may not end up using any of the discard at all, save for we don't talk about Bruno taking out, maybe the last thing on board. Your opponent has played all their cards, and so you get a free draw off Prince John. But yeah, for the most part, you're more trying to control the board and draw cards yourself.
So, Speci, do you concur with that? Do you think the new dominant discard is the blue green that I know you like to run?
Well, I would, but I'm a bit biased. I think like a problem that you have with like these Emerald Steel decks is if you try and fit in much more discard, you just run out of juice elsewhere, right? Like you've got to balance
Mm,
a lot of things in a 60 card deck. You've got to have like the Diablos in there. You've got to have some hidden coves. You need to have some songs. You probably need to play some muses. You do need to like what I liked about Kurt's list is that he didn't sacrifice like the hypnotize and the sudden chills. Like those very much stayed in there, and the four Brunos.
yeah.
Um, like a lot of the time, what I will see with Emerald Steel lists is people will cut those cards, but ultimately, like the discard avenue that you have gives you so much coverage into the metagame that the fact the deck can function without those cards is also, a strength of the deck for sure. I'm
Yeah.
definitely interested in seeing what Sapphire Emerald can do. I think also Amber Emerald, like those two decks can have the potential of being more aggressive with the discard. Whereas Emerald Steel is like a little bit more of like board control plus the option of discard, right? Like your Ursa just threatening to sing Strength or Storm, and then out of nowhere it sings a Sudden Chill is very, very powerful.
Gotcha. Oh, that's awesome.
Do thank you guys for your time. I don't know if you want to end it off with any shout outs if you guys want to say right now, but go ahead. This is your time. If Kurt, you want to start it off.
Yeah, shout out to World Class Cards, my team, for helping me prepare for events and get to events as well. We're all going to be down in Atlanta
Oh,
for
I'm jealous.
the Charlie's Collectible Show big event. So
Oh, I
that's
want
going
to
to be
go.
really fun this weekend. Yeah, and and shout out to the Maryland Lorcana scene. We just had a big 64-person event last Saturday. That was really fun. That was ran by
Nice.
Ink Inc. So shout out to them for running an awesome event, and looking forward to more events to come.
Awesome. Shout out them. Speci, go ahead.
I'd like to say thank you to Moyen, who helped me test, as well as Jamie from my locals, who also helped me test. It was very helpful. They had to draw 100 cards every game, but they kept going, even though it was probably a bit boring. So I appreciate them. And thanks to Kurt for the awesome game. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching. It's a pleasure to be involved. But also, there's another LCC game coming up next, isn't there?
Yes,
There's
there is.
That's right.
Tim's playing versus who is it? Tim versus.
If I can rate it, I'll go ahead and rate it. Not sure if it's on YouTube or Twitch.
Yeah, it's on Twitch and YouTube. It's on Garrick's
Awesome.
channel.
I'm gonna go ahead and rate them. Well, thank you guys. Rose, any last comments you want to end it off?
No, just want to say thanks to you both for taking the time to entertain us and giving us a nice back and forth match. It wasn't stompy, maybe the last game a little bit, but so it was enjoyable.
Oh, I
Enjoyed
tell you what,
what
that game won, man. That's the game. That game.
I
That game was
know.
crazy. Yeah.
That's the game.
When Kurt
I'm gonna watch that
used the
match.
doc to discard like 20 cards just to stop your potential knowledge and wisdom, I was like, oh my goodness.
I couldn't believe it. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you so
appreciate
much, guys. Have a good one. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Speci.
Bye-bye.